My neighbor Barbara knocked on my door that Sunday afternoon. I was in the middle of fixing the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom. I had grease on my hands and a wrench I didn't know how to use properly, and honestly, I was grateful for the interruption. "Martin," she said, and something in her voice made me put the wrench down. "Had you talked to your son lately?" I hadn't. Not in about 3 weeks, which wasn't unusual. My son Theo had been distant since he married Vanessa 2 years ago, and I had learned to stop counting the days between calls. Barbara held up her phone. She was showing me pictures from Instagram. A hospital room. Balloons. One of those white and pink banners that said, "It's a girl." And in the center of the photo, Theo and Vanessa sitting in a hospital bed, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. I had to read the caption twice before I understood it. "She's finally here. Our little Ada. The greatest day of our lives. So grateful for everyone who was with us." Everyone who was with us. I counted at least 6 people in the background of that photo. Vanessa's mother, her sister, 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman in scrubs who was probably the nurse. Not me. I'm Charles. I'm 61 years old. I spent 28 years as a high school history teacher in Columbus, Ohio, before retiring early to take care of my late wife through her illness. After she passed, it was just me and Theo. I coached his baseball team. I taught him to drive in the parking lot of the church on Maple Street. I sat in the front row at his college graduation with a sign I made myself that said, "That's my boy," in red letters. And I didn't even care that people laughed. I became a grandfather 3 days ago, and I found out from a neighbor holding a phone in my doorway. Barbara was watching my face carefully. She didn't say anything else. She just put her hand on my arm for a moment and went back to her house. She's a good woman like that. Knows when words make things worse. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. My coffee was still warm. I stared at that photo on my phone for a long time. Ada. My granddaughter's name was Ada, and I had never heard that name until 60 seconds ago. I called Theo. They rang 4 times, then voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I texted, "Theo, I just found out I have a granddaughter. Please call me." He called back 20 minutes later. His voice was relaxed, almost cheerful, like we were catching up after a weekend. "Hey, Dad. Yeah, Ada was born Friday. She's great." Friday, that was 3 days ago. I sat there in my kitchen and I thought about Friday. I had mowed the lawn on Friday. I had eaten a sandwich alone for lunch and watched the evening news and gone to bed at 10. My granddaughter came into the world and I mowed the lawn. "Theo," I said slowly, "why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me?" He paused. Vanessa wanted the delivery room to be calm. She gets really anxious and she needed things to be low-key. Low-key. There were 6 people in that hospital room. I said that. Another pause. "Those were close family, Dad. Look, it's not a big deal. You can meet her soon. I'm close family, Theo." He didn't answer right away, and in that silence I heard something I'd been refusing to hear for 2 years. I just wasn't in Vanessa's definition of close. "I want to meet her," I said. "This week. We'll figure something out," he said, and got off the phone. We'll figure something out. Not come over tomorrow. Not we were just about to call you. We'll figure something out, like scheduling a dentist appointment. I put the phone on the table and looked at the kitchen around me, the same kitchen where I had fed Theo breakfast for 18 years. The same table where we had sat together after his mother's funeral, and I had held his hand and told him we were going to be okay. I didn't sleep much that night. The thing about Vanessa is that I had never done anything to her. I want to make that clear, because when I tell this story, people sometimes assume the father-in-law must have interfered, must have been difficult, must have given them reason to push him out. I had not. I had been nothing but welcoming from the day Theo brought her home for Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I complimented her work. I asked about her family. I stayed out of their decisions about where to live and how to furnish the apartment and whether to get a dog. Vanessa came from money, not obscene wealth, but the quiet, confident kind. Her father owned a commercial real estate firm in Cincinnati. Her mother had gone to Smith College and had opinions about wine. They were pleasant enough to me at the wedding, in the distant way that people are pleasant to someone they've already decided doesn't quite belong. Theo changed after he married her, slowly at first, then all at once. The calls got shorter. Plans got canceled more often. When I did see him, there was a new carefulness to the way he talked to me, like he was monitoring himself, editing in real time. I told myself it was normal. New marriage, new life, I gave it time. Then I found out about the money. It started with a call from Theo in early January, about 8 months before Ada was born. Dad, I hate to ask, but we're in a tight spot. The new house needs some work done before the baby comes. The HVAC system failed and the estimate is brutal. Could you help out? I said yes. Of course I said yes. I transferred $3,000 to his account and told him to call me if he needed more. He called again in February. The roof had a leak they hadn't caught in the inspection. Another $2,500. I sent it. March. The nursery renovation was going over budget, $1,800. In 3 months, I had sent my son $7,300 from the savings account I had been living off since retirement. I was on a teacher's pension, which in Ohio means you are comfortable but not careless. That money was for emergencies, for the possibility that I might need a new furnace or a medical procedure my insurance wouldn't cover, or, God forbid, that I might someday need help myself. I never questioned him. He was my son. When your son tells you the roof is leaking, you don't ask for an invoice. In April, about 2 weeks after the last transfer, I was at my doctor's office for a routine checkup. My doctor, who's been treating me for 12 years, made conversation while he listened to my heart. He asked if I was still teaching. I told him I'd retired. He asked what I was doing with my time. I mentioned I had a grandchild coming. He said congratulations. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said he had a patient, an older man, who had drained his retirement account lending money to his adult son for home repairs. Found out later the repairs were real, but the house had been sold at a significant profit 3 months after the last check cleared. Never saw a cent of it back. I drove home thinking about that, not because I suspected anything specific, just because the story had burrowed into the back of my mind like a splinter. That evening, on an impulse I can't fully explain, I looked up the property records for Theo and Vanessa's house online. Ohio has a public record system, and it takes about 4 minutes to find what you're looking for. Their house in Dublin was listed, and next to it, a date I did not expect. They had listed it for sale in March, the month after they called me about the nursery renovation. I sat at my desk for a long time staring at the screen. Then I checked if it was still listed. It wasn't. It had sold in late April, 3 weeks after my last transfer. I opened my bank statements and added up the numbers again, $7,300. I called Theo the next morning and kept my voice even. Theo, I was looking at something and I noticed your house in Dublin is showing as sold in public records. Did you move? A long pause. Yeah, we found a place we liked better. Better school district, with the baby coming. Where? Westerville. We closed last month. I thought about the nursery renovation, the one that was going over budget. Did you renovate the nursery at the Dublin house? What? The $1,800 I sent in March. For the nursery. Oh, yeah. We ended up not finishing it before the move. So where did that money go, Theo? Dad, it went toward moving costs. Look, it's complicated. We had a lot of expenses with the transition. Moving costs, HVAC repairs on a house you're about to sell, roof work on a house you're about to sell. $7,300 of my retirement savings spent on a house that sold for, I later learned, $47,000 more than they paid for it. I didn't say any of that yet. I just said okay and let him go. That weekend, I drove past the Westerville address I found in the public records. I don't know what I expected to see. I suppose I expected something modest. Maybe a sensible starter home, the kind you buy when you're being careful with money and starting a family. It was not that. It was a large colonial with a 3-car garage in a neighborhood where every lawn looked like a magazine. A neighborhood that, in Westerville terms, meant a mortgage comfortably north of $600,000. I sat in my car in front of that house for a while. I thought about my kitchen with the leaking faucet I was still trying to fix myself. I thought about the $7,300. I drove home. For the next few weeks, I waited to hear from Theo about meeting Ada. She was almost 3 weeks old by the time he finally called and said we could come by on Saturday. We, meaning me and whoever I brought. I didn't bring anyone. I drove out alone. Vanessa answered the door. She was polished even at home, the kind of woman who is never quite off duty. She smiled at me with her mouth and led me inside to where Theo was holding the baby in the living room. Ada was small and perfect and had Theo's nose, and I thought something of my late wife around the eyes. I held her for about 15 minutes while Theo and Vanessa talked to each other across the room in low voices. Nobody offered me coffee. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody said we're glad you're here, or sorry it took so long. At one point, Vanessa took the baby back and said Ada needed to eat. I sat in their living room that smelled of new furniture for another 10 minutes, while Theo showed me something on his phone. I can't even remember what. Then Vanessa came back without the baby and said Ada was sleeping and they needed to keep the house quiet. I drove home after 40 minutes. In my car in their driveway, just before I pulled out, I looked up at their house and I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Not sadness, something harder than that. I had been sending checks so this house could exist and I'd been permitted 40 minutes inside it. 2 weeks later, Theo called me. Not to check on me. Not to send pictures of Ada. To ask for more money. Dad, I don't want to keep doing this, but we're stretched thin right now. The new mortgage is higher than we planned for and I'm still waiting on a bonus from work. If you could help with 1 month of the payment. How much? $3,200. I didn't say anything for a moment. I want you to understand, this was the moment. I had been a reasonable man my entire adult life. I had been patient and forgiving and slow to anger, the way my own father raised me to be. But something had gone quiet inside me in the 3 weeks since I had sat in their new living room for 40 minutes and been walked to the door. Theo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Sure, Dad. The $7,300 I sent earlier this year, was any of it actually used for the Dublin house? Silence. Or did most of it go toward the down payment and moving costs for Westerville? Dad. Because what I've been sitting with, I said, and I kept my voice steady, is that you sold a house for a $47,000 profit and used my retirement savings to help make that transaction possible. And you did not tell me that was what you were asking for. He didn't deny it. That was the thing that hit me harder than I expected. He didn't say, no, Dad, you've got it wrong. He said, Dad, I didn't think you'd understand the financial logic of it, and we needed to make the move when the market was right. You didn't think I'd understand. It's complicated. Theo, I'm a retired teacher with a pension and a savings account. My financial situation is not complicated. You took money from me by telling me something different from the truth. We paid for most of it ourselves. We just needed a little help bridging the gap. $7,300 is not a little help, I said. And I hung up. He called back that evening. His voice was different, tighter. Dad, look. I know you're upset, but Vanessa and I are building something here. We're trying to give Ada the right start. You know what it means to provide for your family. I do know what that means. I provided for you for 22 years. Right, and I'm grateful. But I'm an adult now, and I'm asking you to be supportive of our decisions, not interrogating them. Supportive. Like sending checks for things I wasn't told the truth about was supportive, and asking a single question was interrogating. I said I would think about it, and I got off the phone. That night I called my old friend Howard, and then I stopped myself because I realized I needed to actually sit with this alone first instead of immediately looking for someone to talk me back down. That was something I had been doing my whole life. Something happened, and I smoothed it over before I had a chance to really feel it. So I sat in my kitchen in the quiet, and I let myself feel it. My son had lied to me. He had constructed small, plausible emergencies to extract money from me while I was on a fixed income. He had kept his daughter from me for the first 3 days of her life, and allowed me a 40-minute visit at a time that was convenient for his wife. He had bought a $600,000 house in a good school district, partly on my dime, and had not found this information worth sharing, and now he was asking for $3,200 more. I did not send it. A week passed. Then Theo showed up at my house on a Thursday evening. Alone, which surprised me. I let him in. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same chairs, and for a moment he looked like himself again, like the kid who used to sit there eating cereal and reading a sports page. I don't want things to be like this between us, Dad. Neither do I. Then help us out. Just this once more. After the bonus comes through, we won't need to ask again. Theo. I said his name slowly. I need you to understand something. I'm 61 years old. I don't have a salary anymore. Every dollar I've given you is a dollar I cannot replace. And I gave those dollars based on information that wasn't true. He looked at the table. I know I wasn't totally straight with you. You told me money was going toward repairs on a house you knew you were going to sell. We made decisions fast. The market moved. That's not an explanation, I said. That's a description. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. Dad, you live alone. You don't have a lot of expenses. What do you need that money for? I looked at my son across my kitchen table and I thought about every morning I had made his breakfast, every baseball game, every time I had stayed up with him when he was sick, every financial decision I had made carefully for 30 years so that I would not be a burden on anyone in my old age. What do I need it for? As if the only legitimate use for my money was funding his mortgage. I need it for me, Theo, I said. I need it for the life I'm supposed to have after working for 30 years. I need it for emergencies. I need it for the freedom to say no. His jaw tightened. This is Vanessa's influence, isn't it? She always said you'd do this. She said I'd do what? Become difficult. Start treating us like we're takers instead of family. I'm not treating you like takers. I'm treating you like adults who weren't honest with me. He left. No goodbye. Just stood up and walked to the door, and I heard his car start in the driveway. I sat at that table for a long time after he left. Then I got up and I opened my laptop and I did something I had been putting off for months. I made an appointment with a financial advisor to review my accounts, and I called an estate attorney to discuss updating my will. Not as revenge, as protection, as the thing I should have done before any of this started. 4 months went by. I'm not going to pretend they were easy. They were quiet in a way that sometimes felt peaceful and sometimes felt like a wound. I saw Barbara occasionally. I volunteered 2 mornings a week at the library. I thought about Ada often, wondered what she looked like now, whether she was sleeping better, whether she had learned to smile yet. Then, one evening in October, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Aldridge? This is Detective Pamela Rourke with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about a complaint filed by your daughter-in-law, Vanessa Morrison Aldridge. I sat down. The detective explained it carefully. Vanessa had filed a report claiming that I had been withholding financial support that she and my son had been relying on, and that my withdrawal had caused them financial hardship. More specifically, she had characterized the $7,300 I had sent as an informal loan agreement and was claiming I had promised additional support that I then refused. An informal loan agreement. I had never used those words in my life. Detective, I said, I have every text message and bank transfer record from the past year. I can show you exactly what was communicated and when. That would be very helpful, she said. I also want to let you know that your son has been cooperative in providing his account of events. I just need to hear yours. I heard in that careful sentence what she was telling me. Theo had backed Vanessa's version. I gave my statement the following morning. I brought my bank records, my phone, and a printed log of every conversation I could retrieve. Detective Rourke was professional and thorough, and I could tell she had seen this kind of situation before, because nothing I told her seemed to surprise her. At the end of our meeting, she said, Mr. Aldridge, I want to be honest with you about how these cases tend to go. Financial disputes within families are difficult to prosecute. What you're describing doesn't meet the legal threshold for elder fraud in Ohio without evidence of intent to deceive. What I can tell you is that the complaint against you has no merit and will be closed, so they won't face any consequences. She paused. Legally, probably not. Not for this. But I would encourage you to make sure your estate documents are current and that any future financial assistance is never given without written documentation of the terms, even to family. I thanked her and drove home. I want to tell you that I was angry. I was. But under the anger was something worse. Grief. Not for what had happened, for what it meant about the years before it, for the possibility that I had been misreading my son for a long time, seeing something in him that was a version of what I wanted him to be. 3 weeks later, Theo called. His voice was subdued. Not apologetic, not exactly, more like a man who has run out of moves. Dad, I know things have gotten bad. I want to try to fix this. I let him talk. He said some things that were close to honest. He said Vanessa had pushed harder than he wanted on the complaint and he hadn't stopped her, which was not a full admission but was more than I'd gotten so far. He said he had been trying to make choices that worked for his family and had lost track of whether they were fair to me. I said, Theo, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry about the money. I'm angry about the money. I'm angry because you looked at me and lied. You decided I was someone you could manage instead of someone you could trust. I know, he said, and your daughter, Ada. I've been her grandfather her whole life, and I've met her once for 40 minutes. He was quiet. I want to be in her life, I told him. I want to be someone she knows, but that has to be a real relationship, not something Vanessa schedules when it's convenient. He said he understood. I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if we're going to be able to put this back together the way it was. You let things happen that you shouldn't have let happen. That's going to take time. I know, he said again. His voice sounded younger than it had in years. I told him I would think about meeting for coffee. I told him nothing about the money would change. I told him I loved him. But that love was not the same thing as a line of credit, and if we were going to have a real relationship, then he needed to understand the difference. We met for coffee 2 weeks later at a diner near my house, just the two of us. No Vanessa. He looked tired. He showed me pictures of Ada on his phone. She had started smiling. She had my late wife's eyes, just like I'd thought. I'm not going to tell you it was a warm reunion. It was two men sitting across a table, trying to figure out if there was something still worth salvaging. It was the beginning of something, maybe, or maybe it wasn't. I honestly didn't know. What I did know was that I drove home afterward, and I sat on my porch for a while, watching the street. The leaves were coming down off the oaks. The neighborhood was quiet the way it gets in early November. I thought about my wife. I thought about who I wanted to be in the years I had left. I thought about Ada and the possibility of watching her grow up if her parents would let me. And I thought about the $7,300. Not with anger anymore. With a kind of clarity. That money was gone. I would not get it back, and I was not going to spend whatever was left of my life trying to. What I had instead was something harder to lose. The knowledge that I had finally asked the honest question instead of smoothing it over. That I had said out loud what I had been afraid to say, and the world had not ended. That turned out to be worth more than I expected. I still don't know how the story ends. Theo and I have had coffee 3 times now. He brought Ada once, and I held her for almost an hour in a diner booth while he ate scrambled eggs, and we talked about nothing in particular. She grabbed my finger and held on. She has her grandmother's eyes. I'm not asking for more than that right now. If he's been through something like this, I'd like to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I read everyone. I've thought a lot about what made me hold on for so long, and I think the honest answer is that I confused love with compliance. I thought being a good father meant being available, saying yes, not making things hard. And somewhere along the way, Theo and Vanessa figured that out and built a system around it. That's the part I had to sit with. Not just what they did, but what I allowed. Every time I transferred money without asking a direct question, I taught them that I wouldn't ask. Every time I smoothed over a canceled plan or a short phone call or a holiday that didn't include me, I taught them that I would absorb it quietly. I wasn't just being patient. I was training them to expect patience without accountability, and there's a difference. What changed things wasn't anger. It was a moment of clear thinking at my kitchen table after Theo left that Thursday evening. I looked around that room and I asked myself a simple question. If I keep doing what I'm doing, where does this end? And the answer I kept arriving at was nowhere good. Not for me, not for Ada, and honestly not for Theo either. Because when you let someone treat you as a resource, you're not helping them grow. You're helping them stay exactly who they are. I think about Theo and what I want for him. And it's not punishment. It's maturity. Real maturity. The kind that comes from understanding that the people who love you most are also people, with limits and dignity and lives of their own. He hadn't learned that yet. Vanessa had made it easy not to, and I had made it easy too, until I stopped. The $7,300 is gone. I accepted that, but what I got back when I stopped sending checks was something I hadn't realized I'd lost. The feeling that my life belonged to me. That I wasn't living on the margins of someone else's financial plan. That my retirement, my quiet mornings, my time, those things had value independent of whether they were useful to anyone else. There's a version of this story where I cut Theo off completely and moved on clean. I understand why some people think that's the right ending, but Ada grabbed my finger in that diner booth and held on, and I'm not willing to walk away from what that might become. What I am willing to do is hold a line. To love my son clearly without pretending. to be in his life on terms that are honest rather than convenient. The choices we make catch up with us, not as punishment from somewhere outside us, but as simple cause and effect. Theo made choices that damaged something real. So did I. By not speaking sooner. Both of those things are true. And both of us are now living with what those choices built. I'm not interested in being right about it. I'm interested in what happens next.